Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I know it's been a while, but welcome back to a brand new episode of Dead Men Talk in what I've decided is going to be the final series. But let's not let's not dwell on that at the minute. Let's get into it. And I've got some fantastic guests to bring you. Um, and the first one who's with me today, many reasons really. There's a couple of particular reasons I wanted to get this gentleman on, but and then it kind of developed into more reasons to bring him on. He's an artist who has worked with some of the most iconic characters of my childhood and a lot of others who I know will probably be watching this, through to something a lot more current, which is very, very interesting that we'll get on in a bit. And he's also from Devon as well, which is just kind of, rounded off. Welcome to the show, John Paul Bove. How are you, sir?
Hello there. I'm good, thank you. Yes.
Cool, cool.
Nice to virtually see you.
I know, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Just literally a few miles down the road. We could have done this in person, really, but
We could have, yeah.
never mind. I haven't quite gone over into that. I launched this in COVID, and I've kind of just stuck with it. Plus, I'm used to having people a lot further away, so this is a bit
Hmm.
odd. But yeah,
Yeah.
welcome. It's fantastic to have you here. Um, I
Representing the South Devon Massive.
Absolutely, absolutely, and a great showcase of the talent we've got here, as people will soon see when we get into talking about your work. And it's one of the great things I think since I've been doing this podcast and looking at the, people from the artistic realm. I never really know how to kind of encompass it, but there's so much down here, and so musicians and actors and that through to guys like yourself who artists. How do you um how do you come? What do you kind of call yourself? Because I've seen artists. You're also a colorist. Is what's the main differences between them? Is there
Yeah.
any?
Well, yeah, there's so primarily most of my work has been as either colorist or writer.
Okay.
And colorist by a significant margin has been most of my work. So in comic books, you've got penciler and then an inker and then a colorist and a letterer. So you've kind of got it in stages. So because the rate at which a comic book has to come out is actually an enormous amount of work to come out monthly.
Mm,
So one person could never get 20 odd pages done a month if they were doing everything. So effectively it's split up into a almost like a production line.
mm,
Um, so the way that I and a right, yeah. So I've generally been at either the beginning or the end of that scale. So I've either written the story or I'm coloring the story. So the colorist will get it after the writer's written it, the penciler's penciled it, and the inker has inked it. So the pencils might be rough. The inker then kind of tidies it up and makes it all purely black and white. And then the colorist comes in and does their job. So I describe the colorist as kind of like the cinematographer.
yeah.
So you're deciding on the mood. Is it daytime, nighttime? Is it dramatic? Is it dreamy? Is it so effectively you're
Wow.
setting up the lighting rig and the color palette and all that kind of stuff. So you're um but because you're at the end of the stage, you're usually the one that's getting left to hit the deadline because everybody else has missed theirs. And there's just
Brilliant.
you left. It's like, oh yeah, remember how you had a month to do this? Well, now you've got, like 8 days.
Brilliant.
So
Everyone else can take their time, get it right, and boom,
yeah. So
Ah,
so but yeah, so I do, I do artwork for like myself, like conventions, things like that. I do stuff that I've drawn myself, but I'm not
mm,
my stuff isn't very comic booky.
okay.
It tends to be kind of I quite like doing art deco and
Yeah.
things like that. So I tend to do I've done like Transformers and Turtles and
Yeah. Yeah.
Star Trek in an art deco kind of style. So yeah.
That's already what we've been going probably 5 minutes, if that. You've taught me a lot already. I never knew there was that many people involved. I just assumed, you know, it was down to one person. I mean, do you go? When I've sort of seen or read about comic book artists and that, it almost looks like they're referencing one person. So I guess it's easy to come up with that
It
perception.
Yeah, it tends to, and I think as a kid, when I was sat reading my Transformers comics with um and dreaming about who these people were and what it was like
Yeah.
to work in it, I didn't really understand I just saw the penciler and assumed that was they just did everything.
Mm,
And then there was a writer. So I kind of got that there were those two parts, and they would always be the ones that you would get, that naturally it's a bit like with films, you tend to get the director
hmm.
and the lead actor, generally the ones that you know, but like, could
Yeah,
you name the writer?
yeah,
Could you name the
probably
person
not.
that did the music or and the director of photography in most of those films is it does 90% of the look of it,
Yeah.
but you rarely know their names. Um, yeah, in comic books is very much a collaborative medium,
Hmm.
so you can't really, you need everybody
Yeah.
to make that a shared
Yeah.
vision in a way.
Yeah. And just having it in my head there with your analogy with the films and stuff, you can actually, you can piece together is exactly the same then, because you have all this credit reel at the end that nobody really sits around and reads them unless you're interested in a particular part. I mean, I guess I've known
Yeah,
musicians who they know who does the music in films because that's what they look out for and things like
yeah.
that. So I guess if you're looking for certain parts of the process, you may recognize that. But wow, well, thank you for that insight. That's brilliant. Let's wind it back just before we kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
to
Sorry.
kick off. Let's know where did it all begin with you then? It's a very broad question I like to ask my guests to kind of open up.
Yeah.
And where did this journey start? Go back as far as you can to where it kind of the kernel of the idea came to you that you wanted to be involved in this kind of thing.
Well, I cannot remember. I cannot remember a time where I wasn't drawing. I loved drawing as a kid. I loved making my own comic books and my own stories, inventing my own characters, things like that.
Mm,
Um, and it never occurred to me that there was a job in
no.
there at all. I don't know. I just it seemed like something that other people could do, and I just consumed it.
Mm,
And then there was a certain point, I think, in my teens where um, I thought, I'm not very good at drawing because I would look at other people's art, particularly in comics, and go,
mm,
well, I can't do that.
mm,
And I kind of gave up. And but I'd always been telling stories, so kind of my brain went, well, I'm going to write. I'm going to
mm.
write things. And I think I'm trying to remember what age I was, probably about 17. I wrote a spec script for Deep Space Nine,
Okay.
which I sent off to Paramount because you were allowed to do those things in those days. I had to get my parents to sign the release form because I was
Yeah.
too young to do it on my own. It was like in hindsight, the script was absolute garbage,
Right.
but it was that thing of I was teaching myself to write screenplays. I loved film and TV. I'd kind of moved to film and TV as my main inspiration. I really, really wanted to write for film and TV.
Mm,
Um, I did a degree in something that had absolutely nothing to do with art, and I kind of like, and then what happened was um, Transformers came back in
mhm.
comics,
Yeah.
and I happened to be away somewhere, and I picked up the first issue, and I thought, all right, well, I'll keep going. I
Yeah.
might as well keep going. I used to love this. I'll keep going. Um, and started picking up the comics, and at the same time, I realized a lot of the people I really admired in television were writing comics. There was people like Joe
Okay.
Straczynski, who wrote for Babylon 5, was doing Spider-Man and Rising Stars and things like that. And Joss Whedon, who was doing Buffy at the
Yeah.
time, was doing Buffy comics and X-Men. And that kind of led me down a bit of a rabbit hole. And I thought, oh, okay, um, there's something here. There's
Mm,
something here. I'm enjoying the kind of storytelling you can do in comics that you can't do
mm,
on film and TV.
yeah.
Um, and the local comic book shop had a group that met every 2 weeks, I think. And the idea was literally just to meet up with like-minded people and um, produce stories and stuff.
Okay.
Um, and there was a Bristol Comic Con, and the idea was to have a comic out by then.
Mm,
And what happened was I was happy writing. I drew as well, but I started to meet people who were really, really, really good at comic book art, and I thought, well, I know where my strengths are.
yeah, that's
I'm going
fair
to
enough.
write.
Yeah.
I'll let them draw. but I wanted to tell the stories in color, and I thought, well, I don't know anyone who's a colorist, so I guess I'll teach myself.
Wow.
So I sat there with Photoshop that I'd never used, and got tutorials and various bits and bobs, and yeah, just it took me just like a day to produce one panel,
Okay.
the beginning. Um, but yeah, I got more and more into that, and working on, and then people would ask me to work on their stuff, and
Cool.
um, yeah, so
That's
that was the beginning, really.
that's one of those stories that you kind of just everyone wants to happen to them, if I'm honest. Is like you find something that you want to do, that you love to do, and you find a way into it, and you can literally teach yourself. I mean, I'm guessing it's evolved over time. You know, you've obviously
Oh
taught yourself
yes.
a lot over the course of the time since then. But that's very that's a great way of saying you got into it. It's literally, yeah, I found the gap in the market and I decided to teach myself how to fit into it. I mean, that's
Yeah, and then it was doing fan stories for, there was an online community was doing Transformers little one page things that I was writing them, I was coloring them from other people, um and a few of those guys started to get breaks doing comic books,
mm,
and I'd worked with them and they were like, well, this guy can color my stuff really well, let's give him a chance.
right.
And that was it. And that's why I say I've sort of most of my time has been coloring books.
Mm.
Coloring books sounds like a very basic thing, but you
Certainly
know,
not. Certainly not.
yeah, and then some writing as well has
Wow.
come from that. So
That's fantastic. No, well done. Well done. So where did that once you got to the point that you were like, okay, I found my little bit that or the bits that I can do. What was the big step then? What sort of put you? Where did it start changing for you with that? And turn around and told you actually I could probably look at doing this for a living.
um, it's tricky. There's sort of like there's probably three or four like main markers, I would say. So the
Okay.
first one was just getting my first comic book at all,
Mm.
which I was one of those ones where you'll get a share of the profits. And I was pretty sure it was never going to make any profit, but I was just really pleased to have done the book.
Yeah.
So that was like my first credit, and that first credit just gave me that when I would approach someone else, I could say I have published work. So to
Yeah.
me, that was like without that, nothing else happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, After that, it was a couple of things came at once. It was I got to do some Godzilla covers. IDW, which is the company that was doing them, they had this initiative where if you bought a certain number of books,
Mm.
this is the comic book shops, you could have your comic book shop being stomped by Godzilla. So
That's cool.
as the front cover.
Wow.
So as a result, there were a lot of covers that were done for that, and they needed them turned around really quick. And
Okay.
again, so that was my first sort of thing where I got to prove that I could do the work fast,
Yeah.
which is a really important skill in the thing.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, that led to bits and pieces really. So I would say the big. I mean, I did a few pages of a Doctor Who book that was running a bit behind, and then it kind of all happened at once, where I describe being an artist as feast and famine, that you either end up with more than you can possibly cope with, or nothing at all.
Yeah.
And it was a point where there was they announced, I think it was at San Diego Comic-Con, that they were going to do a Transformers book that was the original UK writer who
Mm.
wrote it up until 1991,
Okay.
one of the original artists who again finished it in 1991, original inker, but they hadn't announced a colorist.
Right.
And I'm not a pushy person. I'm terrible at things like networking.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hate approaching people. I like doing the work. I like doing the work.
I think artists of any ilk, I write, or I did do a few years ago. That was the
Yeah,
worst thing. We can't sell ourselves. I
yeah.
think it's the hardest thing to do. So yeah, I'm with you there.
Uh, but this was the only time where I emailed the editor in chief, who I met him at this point. I think I might have met him a couple of times and said hello. He's a lovely guy. Um, but I said, look, and again, even in the the typical self-deprecating way. It was like, look, I realize there's probably, you may already have someone, there's probably a million people you could call upon that you know really well, but I cannot stress enough how much this would mean to me, and how hard I would work for it and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought I'll put it out there. I'll put
Yeah.
it out there, and then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
And he said it's kind of basically up to the artist who he's happy to work with. And I went, okay, fair enough. Well, we'll just see. And over time, I kind of got to know him a little bit better. And then I was at a convention, and he said, "Oh, I've said to them, I want you." And I'm like, "What?
Hey.
You what now? What? You what? You do what now?" And I didn't know that. I didn't know he obviously he'd already decided in his head, but I had no idea.
Forgot that you didn't know or something.
So I mean, there was still quite a lot of kind of hurdles to go through between then and it actually kicking off. But that for me was the beginning, really, where everything kicked off. So because I did that within, I was doing conventions. I did a talk at a convention about colouring, and then one of the guys who attended that said, "Oh, I've just been tasked to draw a Turtles book, but I don't think I'm going to have enough time to do the colouring, and actually I'd really like you to do it." So I was like, "Oh, awesome, okay." And then at that same convention, that he said he wanted me to do that, I put in a portfolio review because I still find it very hard to meet editors and things like that. So I thought, well, I'll go for a portfolio review. And the editor from 2000 AD said, we normally have a couple of colorists that do everything for us, so we don't have a lot of opportunity, but your stuff's really good. Could you start doing something for us on Monday? No, that never happens. That's the story you want to be true.
Absolutely.
But never happens.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I was there with 3 books. All at the same time. I'm like, oh, holy am I allowed to swear on the podcast?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, holy shit. Yeah, so, and I still had a full-time job at this point as well. So I'm just kind of like, it was, there was a few years there I was running at like 110 hours a week, kind of sort of. It was rough, but yeah, and that particularly the the Transformer stuff really just sort of and that I think we're now looking at 12 years since I did like my first Transformers thing.
Wow.
And I've been pretty consistently working on something Transformers related.
That's cool.
For over a decade.
That's amazing. So what was you thinking back to that day then when you came away from that convention with all of that going on? How do you what did you just sit down, have a quiet moment, try to digest it? What are you thinking then? How do you attack that?
I think, to be honest, it very quickly became that I was so tired, and so I didn't. I mean, when I was, because people often say, oh, it must be lovely doing what you love, and I kind of go, well, yes, except, and Godzilla was the perfect example of this, where there were so many things to be done. I was doing something else at the same time, and I can remember getting up, not having time to get dressed or have a shower, so I just literally got up and started to work.
Right.
And I can remember being sat there in my dressing gown thinking, if I can just get 2 more pages done, I'll treat myself and go for a pee. Like that's like workhouse conditions. That's like slave labor.
Yeah.
But it was that thing of like this, I don't have time to think about it. So at that, when it sort of kicked off, I didn't have time to think about it. The minute I got the Transformers one, I was like, I'm working with a writer who I absolutely loved, admired, and am inspired by, an artist who I used to spend my days like copying his stories and stuff. And then that's where I really started to understand where the Inca came in, because once I could see all the stages of their work, I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't realize how much of what I was copying was also like the Inca's work.
Okay.
Because I didn't appreciate that. I didn't really understand what that role was. So yeah, and I just, I have, you can't see them because I've had to turn the lights off in this room.
That's right.
But there's like, I've got like multiple folders full of the old the Marvel UK Transformers comics
Oh wow.
with all their stuff in. And then in my bookshelves, on the spine of every book is, Furman, the writer, Wildman, Baskerville. And I remember when I finally got told I was going to do it, and I looked over at my bookcase, and I'm like, one day there's going to be a trade paperback in there, and it's going to have my name on it as well, with them,
Yeah.
And that was so no, it's a dream that I haven't. It's never stopped being a dream come true, and every time I think, well, that's it over now, something else comes along where I'm like, I wasn't expecting that. I got to do the artwork for a toy box, and different bits and bobs that popped up along the way. You just think, well, I can't believe I'll never get, nothing can excel this one thing that I've just done.
Yeah.
And then somehow there's something that's like you never imagined was possible, pops along, 6 months later.
Yeah.
So
just keeps going. I can imagine it's quite difficult knowing, you worked on so much. Let's take Transformers for a moment. To give us an idea of some of the more kind of well-known stuff, if there is anything that stands out of what you've done that people may, the fans may know more than others. If there is
there's a couple of things. So that almost by accident, possibly, most of the stuff that I've done has been in Transformers related stuff has been stuff that harks back to the classic stuff. So Regeneration 1, which I did, was the continuation of the original book. So it was literally the original book. It did have an ending, but it was very sudden. So we got to kind of do another 22 issues that kind of told that story to the end. And then I was like, okay, well that was that. We've said the end, and then was it a couple of years ago or pre-pandemic? They announced that they were going to do sort of a prequel series, which was that kind of tied in at the beginning. So I actually got to do that in a style just like the old books, with all the kind of like the dots rather than like the solid colors. Which was a bit like forensic comic booking, because I'd scan in the old stuff, the biggest possible, so I could see what the dots were and what they overlapped with to get that particular color of gray or whatever. So a lot of it was the kind of that classic stuff. So I've done some of the more modern as well, but I'm mainly known for doing a lot of the kind of not exactly retro, but stuff that looks back. And then the one that kind of, there's a series called the Definitive Generation 1 Collection, which was released by Hachette, and that was pretty much everything Transformers that had ever been published in one of those partwork style collections. And again, you think, okay, my journey's over with this now. But there was about 400 pages, I think, of Marvel UK Transformer stuff that was in black and white that had never been coloured back in the day. To save money, some of the pages were black and white in the comic, and they'd never been coloured up. So suddenly it was, hey, we want to colour up 400 pages of the original stuff from the original book. And I'm like, so again, I got to work on the artwork of people who I've grown up with that I would never have imagined, and I used to sit there with crayons trying to colour them in. Back in the day, ruined some of my.
But now you're being trusted to, produce a real thing. That's amazing.
And then, if not skipping ahead, or I don't know if it's, but then last year, being asked, do you want to do Transformer stamps for Royal Mail?
There we go. Let's bring it to the main event. I mean, this was what got my attention and got me to know who you were and sort of piece it all together, because you stumbled on a few of the local news pages around here, because you're from Devon,
and not for one of my many crimes. So that was good.
No, absolutely not. No, you'll be remembered in infamy for something else now. But so just to kind of fill in the gaps with the relevance for this in my story, I suppose, is a few weeks ago I was sending a couple of cards, a couple of letters, old school, actually going to the post office. and buying the postage. And the lady behind the desk said, "Oh, would you like one of the Transformers stamps?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"What?" Didn't know what they were. I was like, "Of course." So she
Yeah.
looked at me. She gave me a choice between Optimus Prime and oh god, no, I'm going to show my ignorance here. Megatron, is it?
Megatron.
Sorry,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
This is where my transform. I'll come back to one of the things you've done, and you'll see why I was big on
yeah, yeah.
something else. So she gave me a choice, and I was like, "Well, it's got to be Megatron, isn't it? I'm one that always backs a villain." To be fair, and she said, "Yeah, I thought you'd go for that. You looked the
She
type."
she had the measure of you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that meant. I don't really know how to take that, but I was like, "Wow, there's Transformer stamps out there. It's fantastic." And then a news story came across on my news feed that showed you as one of the guys behind them. And the fact, one of the most, apart from there being Transformers, one of the special things about these is they are probably going to be one of the last, if not the last, set of stamps to be produced with Her Majesty the Queen's head on them.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that. So let's sort of scale it back before we get to that kind of historic part. Is when you were told about that this would be a thing, So
Yeah.
so what were your thoughts? How did that come about? Was it just simply them coming to you and say, just like you just said,
Well,
how about something else?
no. So again, well, it's one of those things where so again, just thinking about, I thought my journey with Transformers was about to end because I'd at the time, I'm not quite sure exactly the time, but basically IDW that has the Transformers license had just lost the license. So they basically were only going to produce Transformers comics until the end of this year.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, well, I don't know where it's going to go next. I don't know if I'll get to work for them or not. I don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of thinking that was that. And then I got a message kind of out from one of the people at Hasbro, which is who makes Transformers, and said, there's this project and can I pass your details on to them? And I'm like, yes. But he couldn't say what it was. And I'm like, okay.
Risky
All
then, isn't it?
right.
Really, but you got to trust them, I
Well,
suppose.
I absolutely trusted this guy. So I was like, well, we'll find out. And I was like, what could it be?
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I got a message and it said, you need to sign this non-disclosure agreement.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay. And the non-disclosure agreement had Royal Mail on it.
Okay.
And I'm like, could this be like it couldn't actually be, could it? Like it wouldn't be. It couldn't be.
Okay.
And then Andrew Wildman and Stephen Baskerville, so again the Peninsula and Inca,
Mm-hmm.
it, were all of a sudden we were on a group call and it was, look, we are looking to do Transformer stamps. And I'm like, okay, this is
What?
awesome. And they're like, yeah, and they were like, but because Royal Mail stamps have got to have a British component to it,
Yeah.
and a huge part of the Transformers comics was British writers, British
Yeah.
artists, and
Never knew that, by the
obviously,
way, until I read about it. Never knew that. So I didn't know there was a British
yeah,
stamp like that. So that's cool. That's cool.
yeah. So I mean, I've not to discount any of the Americans in there as well, but a lot of what the British contribution to Transformers is still sort of the legacy still lives on.
Mm.
And yeah, so we had this meeting and it was, they were kind of like, well, look, we've got to have Optimus Prime and Megatron.
Mm-hmm.
These are the pairings we're thinking about. What do you think? And of the three of us, I was very much the one that grew up with it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, well, little the sort of, I wore my nerd colors proudly because it's like if you're going to have Swoop, the Dinobot in this, he does appear in two different colors depending on whether it's the cartoon or the comic. So you will have to. So you kind of have these things where you just and also because you want the end thing to be loved by as many people
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah.
And people that grew up with the comics, people that grew up with the cartoon,
Mm.
they're not the same thing. They kind of got their own storylines. Anyway, so yeah, it was great because it was like, what sorts of, where do you think they should be? What environment should they be in? So we got to have quite a lot of input into to where they'd be set.
Mm.
And again, for me, I was like, look, do you want it? Because they didn't really know how they wanted them to look.
Okay.
And I'm like, do you want it old school?
Mm,
Do you want it modern? Do you want a combination of the two?
mm,
You know, my feeling was to make them, one's a jungle, one's in a sort of a rocky desert, one's at night, one's in space.
yeah.
So it was like trying to find so they would all feel different,
Mm-hmm.
um, and stuff like that. So and then there were things you have to be mindful of, like you can't have. I don't know if you can't or not, but we were kind of discouraged from doing things that involve people pointing guns at other people.
I can understand that. Probably.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of kind of holding guns in a slightly oblique
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of angle stuff. And that was it really. Yeah, we got to have quite a lot of kind of say and
That's
and
cool.
and and control over it in a way. I mean, it seems like it would be easy, but it was actually like preposterously hard work.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
because it has literally they have to be approved by the Queen.
That's insane, isn't it?
So every single stamp, well, up until her passing, obviously,
Yeah.
has to be approved by the monarch.
Okay.
So it was all about getting it to be perfect and meet the needs, everything else. And I like to think because realistically, her grandchildren are about my age,
Yeah.
so I imagine they must have had Transformers in the
I was going to
house.
say, do you think she was a fan, or at least there should have been within the family somewhere? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, she approved them. I'm told it was a swift approval. So um, and yeah, but it was like when they said, oh yeah, blah blah blah, because when the Queen looks at them, and I went,
Yeah.
and they went, no, the Queen has to approve them. And they're going, way,
And all
okay,
of a
all
sudden,
right,
so here you are. You thought your journey had ended, and it take this epic turn somewhere that you didn't think
yeah.
it was going to
And I
go.
could not say anything. I couldn't say anything for a year until they were sort of initially
Yeah.
announced. Even the convention I was at, they didn't even announce what the art looked like,
Right.
or the artist until the second day of the convention. So I had people come up to me going, "Oh, have you seen those stamps? They look really nice." And they're going,
Mm,
"Yes, yes,
good
will you be getting a set?" Probably
Probably.
will pick up a set. Yeah. So yeah, it was. I take non-disclosure really, really
Yeah, of
seriously.
course. Yeah.
So I was just kind of, oh, I want to tell you, I want to tell everyone. And then yeah, it kind of went bonkers when it got announced. It was on the BBC News
Yeah.
and also and incredibly for something involving my art, they actually had our names on it.
That's brilliant.
Because half the time it's like they're releasing Transformer stamps, and
There you
then
go.
then you never actually get any credit anywhere. And I was, oh
No,
my goodness, they've actually my name is
that's
on all
really,
of
really
this,
cool.
and
And
it's on all the
why not?
stamps as well.
I say,
It's
yeah,
on the booklets.
I'm waiting for, so I've got one on order. I'm waiting for them to arrive. So I was hoping there would be some kind of reference.
Yeah,
That's really good. I mean, that's got to be good, for you to know that they are. Whereas, like we were talking about earlier on, yeah, people's individual roles that may get overlooked, in the grand scheme of things, but something as historic as, especially now, you've got that mark on there.
well, this is the thing that's made my mum proudest.
Hmm.
Like in 12 years, this is the thing.
There you go.
Um, and people who've never read a comic in their life have heard about the stamps,
Yeah,
and said, "Well, congratulations," and and whatnot. So it's really exciting to have my work seen
hmm.
by different people in a different way
Yeah,
and appreciated in a different way. Um, it is again properly exciting, and
yeah,
just I couldn't have imagined that. I
yeah.
couldn't have guessed that I'd be doing stamps for Royal
No,
Mail in a billion years.
no,
Not in a billion.
and just sort of the timing of it, the next aspect of it, like I mentioned, where it might actually be one of the last. I don't know if they know
Yeah.
if it is officially or whatever, but
I
obviously just the timing of that and the Queen passing away added a new
yeah.
aspect of how you would encompass it. I would think it's exciting, under odd
Yeah,
circumstances, but
yeah, it's kind of I think it's just one of those things that it's like it's more just like a realization of just a fact in a way.
mm,
It's because it wasn't until someone said, "All these might be the last ones."
yeah, it's not something you
And
set out to do, is it? Obviously,
no, exactly. And I mean, regardless, they're the last ones that came out in her lifetime.
yeah,
Um, whatever that comes out afterwards. So,
Yeah.
um, but no, I think it's yeah. I mean, I'm very proud to have done them,
Mm.
and still unreal. I mean, my dad was a postman as well, so it's kind of like it
See here,
felt
yeah.
weirdly right. That and somehow more of an honor to have done
Yeah.
it in a way I can't quite explain.
Yeah.
Um,
Fate works
but
in odd
no,
ways, doesn't it? That's just one of those things that kind of brings your family history full circle in a way,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
That's brilliant.
So this might be the end now of my Transformers journey. So I have nothing on the horizon
If it
with Transformers.
was,
So
if it was, would you be happy? Any regrets at all about sort of anything you've
no,
done, not done?
I think I would have loved to have written more for Transformers. I only got to write one comic, um, and it was sort of it was a piece of something larger that I wanted to do, and I
Okay.
only ever got to do the piece.
Yeah.
So I'd love to write something
Okay.
more and actually tell a complete story, even if it's just a
Sure.
mini series.
Yeah.
Beyond that, no, I've got no regrets of anything that I did do. Um, I in the time that I was have been working on it, I've got to you know do conventions in because of Transformers New York,
Mm.
San Diego, and Los Angeles, Sweden, Germany, um, Ireland,
Wow.
Wales, Scotland. Um, I'm sure there are other. Oh, Malta. The Malta.
Okay.
There's loads of places I've been to which I couldn't have done had it not been for Transformers. I've made
Yeah.
incredible friendships. Some of the people I've worked with are like family to me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's mostly been that some of it has been ridiculously hard work.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not there were definitely days where the pace of the work was brutal.
Yeah.
Um, and I always say this that Transformers takes me 3 times longer than anything else
Okay.
to do because if you've got a person,
Mm.
if I'm drawing me,
Mm.
well, this color's going to be a flesh color of a sort,
Yeah.
and then my clothes are whatever my clothes need to be.
Yeah.
If you're Spider-Man, you got effectively 3 colors,
Yeah. Yeah.
blue, red, and then flesh color. And if it's
Yeah.
Spider-Man, nothing, you don't even have that. With a transformer, it's like, right, okay, well, here's Optimus Prime, and he's these bits are blue, these bits are red, this bit's grey. His eyes have to be a particular color. You've got to get all the right bits in the right sequence, and
Yeah.
then there's Megatron, who's this color. So even just to do a panel with 5 characters on
Mm.
is a lot of reference, and because you've got a lot of angles,
Yeah.
there's effort involved, and they're shiny, so you've got
Yeah.
to like render in the show. So you wouldn't do Transformers unless you love it, and a lot of people have either drawn or color Transformers, and they've just given up. They do it
Right.
for a bit, and they're like, no, I'm done, because unless you love it,
Yeah.
you're not willing to do the hours on it. So um so no, I feel genuinely blessed to have done the stuff that I've done.
Yeah.
I hope that it isn't over, but if it is, I yeah, I had the time of my life on it.
Cool. Well, let's hope it's not for all the fans out there. I must admit, I grew up with the cartoon. I was never really, I wasn't a comic book reader collector when I was younger, but Transformers was definitely there. It was on the TV. I had a few of the toys. I had that kind of interest in it.
Mhm.
One of the things I want to touch on before we finish, though, that
Yeah,
I see that you have done is, and you've briefly mentioned it, the Turtles.
yeah, yeah.
That was my big thing when I was a kid. So I'm very, very interested in knowing a little bit more in the time that allows. Sort of what have you worked on? Briefly, how that kind of slotted in, but yeah, sort of the kind of things that you worked on and that with that.
Yeah, so the main stuff was so the IDW Turtles comics are kind of like their own continuity.
Mm.
And I got to write not write, I colored a comic on about Fugitoid, if you remember Fugitoid.
Mm-hmm.
And then completely disconnected from that. Um there was a comic that based on the not Rise of the Turtles, whatever the most recent was, the one before that was just called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
That was that 20, I want to say 2012, but I think it was later than that.
Okay.
Um, anyway, and an editor was looking for writers and asked said, "Oh, do we to various guys, do you know anybody that can do like comedy and action type stuff?"
Yeah.
And someone very kindly suggested me, and I sent in a couple of samples. And again, um, I thought I do not have a cat in hell's chance of this. And I knew some of the other people who had also had their names put forward. I thought, well,
Right.
they've been in the industry forever.
Yeah.
They've done lots of like, kids friendly comics and whatnot. I thought, well, this is not going to happen. And then to my amazement, there was me and one other guy that were basically because they said you've got the voice of the show.
Okay.
And actually, one of the story outlines I submitted, they said they couldn't use because it was already an episode in production.
Okay.
So that was both A, great news that I was on the right wavelength, and B, really annoying because I had to come up with another idea. Yeah, so I wrote a few issues of the Turtles UK stuff, which it was definitely a struggle in the beginning. I don't think they really knew there was a lot of hands over everything
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
trying to it was definitely a bit of a struggle at the
Yeah.
start. But then I got to do a few issues later on, and I really, really, really had a lot of fun
Yeah.
um with those. So yeah, so it wasn't the classic kind of 80s turtles.
No. No. No.
Um
No.
but it was the I must admit, I actually when it first came up, I thought this cartoon's going to be rubbish. But I want to be a writer. This is
Yeah.
what I got into. So I'll watch a few episodes
Yeah.
and try and get the sense of it. And I loved it.
Yeah.
Thought it was brilliant. I think the whole series is brilliant. And I was like, this is going to make my life so much easier.
Yeah.
That this is something that I genuinely think is a ton of fun.
Yeah.
They all feel like different characters. They don't all feel like the same thing.
Mm.
The story's actually a bit deeper than it appears at the beginning.
Right.
And it's quite rich and quite inventive and quite unexpected.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was like, I could definitely write for this. This is, count me
Oh,
in.
no,
So yeah, when I
absolutely.
got it, I was happy as Larry. So
So what I love, nostalgia is my thing as well. Is you might get a feel for that 80s, 90s, anything I grew up with. I love the fact there's this. I don't know if it's a resurgence or it's just the fact that these things have just carried on and they've just kept um, evolving over time. And still appeal to the old fans like us, but also the new generation as well. There's something for everyone, and it's good
my
news.
yeah, the way that I kind of looked at it is I feel like I don't know how old you are, but I'm 42, so I was born
Mm.
in 1980,
Hmm.
and I feel like that basically anyone born after that point has never had to grow up. By which I mean, like Transformers is a rare exception where it has never stopped from
Mm.
1984 until now. Like there's been the odd lull, but it really has never properly stopped.
Yeah.
Um, but if you were born in the 70s and whatever you were into in the 70s, once they stopped showing it on the telly,
Mm.
that was it. You couldn't
Yeah.
get it on video. They didn't necessarily get it rerun because they were trying
No.
to sell a different toy. They stopped selling the toys.
Mm.
Fast forward a bit, in the 80s, you kind of could at least buy videos of it.
Mm.
But if as a teenager, 60s, all of a sudden you had eBay, which meant you
Yeah.
could buy the stuff that you know you
Yeah.
let go of or
That's
couldn't
it.
find
Or
anymore. It
missed
wasn't
out
just
on
like, do you
completely.
remember?
Yeah.
And then you had YouTube where you could watch the old shows and cartoons. And then really, as soon as that happened,
Mm.
you never had to grow up. So if you're into Pokemon when you were 5, there's no reason that you can't still love it now.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel again it's a bit lucky in a way because you know at this point Turtles is never going to go away.
No.
He-Man's going to keep coming back. Transformers is never going to go away. They're going
Yeah.
to there's someone will find a way to
Yeah,
make it into something else. So
yeah.
again, it's a unique
I think
time of living.
Thundercats is the one they need to do something with. That's the missing
Again,
piece
they
for me.
tried,
Hmm.
and it
Oh,
was
that
really
god
good.
awful! Oh, gee, I
Just
didn't
oh
like
no
it.
no no,
Not the
which one
really,
are we
really
talking
new,
about?
the really, really new ones.
No no, the really really new one I did not see
No.
and did not. No, there was one before that, in I don't know, like 2015 or something, or
Okay.
2014. And it only lasted one season, but it was
That's a shame.
great.
Was
It was
it?
really, really good. Yeah, and it just
Ah.
the toys didn't sell, I don't think, and it just disappeared. But they did a really good job with that. Really good job.
I must sniff that. I might have to sniff that out. They've been teasing a
Yeah,
film, haven't they, for years now and years. Or if it's just a bit of a fan fiction kind of thing that there's a
yeah,
film in the works. I would love that. I would love that.
yeah.
But what a great sentiment to finish on. I think that is fantastic. You've encapsulated exactly what I feel anyway. Yeah, for the record, I was born 1984, so exactly
Ah,
within the run that you're talking about. Yeah, the fact that this stuff's still around, and I'm trying to pass it on to my kids. My little
yeah,
boy loves the turtles. I think when he was like 18 months, 2 years old, I was sat him in front of the DVDs I had bought myself of the old
yeah,
like 80s 90s stuff. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, it's a good time. It's a good time, and I would say then the fact that guys like you are contributing to it, keeping it alive. Thank you for all of that, and you know, I
I
know
did
it's.
nothing. I just enjoyed myself.
There you go. There you go. Listen, last knockings, mate. Where can anyone who has been watching this, who wants to find out a bit more about what you do, what you've done, where are you on the interweb? Where can they find you? Contact you?
I'm so I am on things like Instagram and whatnot, but I almost never remember to actually post anything there.
Okay.
So Twitter, I'm on a reasonable amount. So I'm at Wordmongerer on Twitter, and on Facebook, I'm just me. Um, and that's pretty much the only social media
Okay.
I tend
Cool.
to use. So yeah, you'll find me in one of those two places.
Cool. Brilliant, mate. Thank you very much. And I'll put your links on the description and everything like that. And
Thank you.
thank you so much for taking your time. It's been fantastic talking to you and finding out more about how you've got into this crazy world. And it's something like me. I look at these things from afar, sometimes forgetting the people that have helped put it together. So it's fantastic just hearing your bit. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you
And
very much. Thank you for having me.
no, anytime, mate, anytime. And yeah, all the best for the future, whatever lies ahead. So
Thank you very much.
speak to you again, mate.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram to keep updated about all future shows.